So today we're going to be looking into an updated feature on the Audit Toolbar. Now, for those of you who've previously used the Audit Toolbar before, this is an update to our GL cleaners. So it is now called UniCleaners, and instead of the way it used to work before, where you'd have to select a accounting system for the specific GL that you want to clean, in this case, the Audit Toolbar will recognize it automatically. Now, there are two sides of how the UniCleaner works. If it can recognize that GL, then you can run the GL cleaner no problem from start to finish. Then, if it is unrecognized, then there's a second side of it where we need to help the Audit Toolbar to understand what the layout is of that GL so that it can then clean up this information for us. So let's have a look at exactly what we need to do when it recognizes the GL. So here I've got a GL from 0, right? And when I go ahead and I click on UniCleaner, what we'll see is it will tell me that this system is identified. Okay, so now that we know that it's identified and we want to apply trends, then we go ahead and we click continue. And what happens is the Audit Toolbar then starts to run the cleaning process, and then it will give us the results that we are expecting, which is, first of all, a clean table without any of those all of the items that we see here, which are blank rows, these items above here that we don't actually need, with and actually putting all of our account numbers next to each and every single transaction, removing the totals, those kinds of things. And then it's going to take that table and then give that to us in a proper pivot table. And there we go. So like I mentioned, here's the original sheet. Here is the clean sheet where we have all of our account names next to each and every single transaction. We've got a new column called period, where we're just telling you if it's an opening balance and in what month that item is coming from. And then we've got a new column here for our amount, where we've just taken the debit and the credit and put it together over here. Okay, now when we head over into the summary tab, this is where we see that we've got a pivot table, which is the month to month, which is showing us the month to month movements, right? So for each and every single month here, for every single one of our accounts all the way down, including our opening balances, which essentially means that this grand total column over here is essentially our closing balance for this GL. Okay, now one thing to notice is you can see there's highlights going through all of the months. And what this is that trend analysis, that trend chart, okay? And it is telling us what is the lowest value, what is the highest value, and what are the values in between. So it's kind of just giving us a proper view as to how our accounts have been moving throughout the year. Because with this information, when we look at just account 1, what we can then see is that the highest value is over here in our last period. The lowest value seems to be repeating every 2 months, so at the first 2 months of the quarter, right? And then we've got this value which is in between but closer to the highest value than it is exactly the middle point. And with this information, with just these highlights, we clearly see that there's a pattern in this account, okay, that is telling us that there's some kind of fixed cost with a semi-variable, semi-variable cost linked to it. And with that, we can clearly expect that there would be some kind of service agreement, or something that would explain exactly why these are happening this way, and we can agree this to our understanding of the account, what we're expecting in this account, and if this is going the way this account should be. So so in essence, this then helps us with understanding what this account does, as well as our risk assessment of the account. Now, if we then scroll down to the bottom of this sheet, what we'll see is over here we've got zero balances for each and every single one of our months, okay? And that essentially means that for each and every single debit, there is an equal and opposite credit that's been raised. So this is already helping us with our accuracy and completeness of this GL. The next thing we then see is that actually in our opening balance column, right? So here's our opening balances. We see that there's a difference of 47 million. And this difference generally relates to your opening balances, retained earnings or retained income, or that profit and loss movement from the prior year, which hasn't been allocated into the opening balances of retained earnings. So generally, this value will agree to my prior year's profit and loss movement / income statement movement, obviously adjusted for any tax movements or any adjustments that need to be made before it then goes into retained earnings. So this is that value. And you'll see that on some accounting systems, this will net off to zero, but on some accounting systems it won't. On most accounting systems, actually, it doesn't net off to zero, and that is because of that opening balance item. Okay. Now, with this information, there's one more thing that I want to show you guys, which is a very easy and a quick tip that helps you when you're about to perform sample selection, or if you want to, look into a specific amount a little bit more. All right. So this function that I'm about to show you is called drilling down, and it works on any pivot table in Excel. And essentially what this allows you to do is to simply double click on any value that you see on your pivot table, and it will give you all the transactions that make up that value. So as an example here, let's look at the value that comes from account 1 in the last period. So if I double click that value, we now see that I get a new sheet, and it then populates the transactions that make up that value. Now I can look at my total over here, and we see that my total is the same as what we had on the summary tab. Okay, so how you can use this very efficiently is simply filtering over here for, maybe you want to select a sample for X amount of accounts, right? So let's just say these are the accounts that I want to select my sample for. And once I've filtered for those accounts, I can then double click on the grand total. So when I double click on the grand total, I then get every single transaction that makes up that account. So for those accounts. So if I look at my filter over here, we'll see it's only the accounts that I've selected. And if I look at the total in my amount column, we'll see that the sum is the same as the value that I double clicked on. All right. Perfect. So that's how the GL Cleaner works when it can recognize the system. Now, next we're going to look into how to run this if the system is unrecognized. And what we're going to do is we're going to start off by heading into the GL Cleaner, the UniCleaner. And when I click on UniCleaner, what happens is it tells me that the system is unrecognized, okay? And it's telling us that what we need to do next is to proceed to the automated GL recognition parameters. And what the automated GL recognition parameters are is essentially, right, when we click here on the more button, it then gives us an explanation of exactly what that is. And it's telling us that on the next step, UniCleaner is going to ask us for examples of some of the data points in our GL. And these examples can be range from the line items to column headers to your nominal codes, actual dates, actual values, those kinds of things. And so let's head over into the next let's click on continue, go to the next step so that we can fill in these GL recognition parameters. Now, when I click on continue, the Audit Toolbar will work on this information ever so slightly so that it is a little bit easier for us to work with. Okay, and then the first thing that we see is that we've got a screenshot over here that just shows us what to expect from this recognition parameters. And we see that they are color-coded cells, and that color coding matches what we have here on the side, which means that when I select, let's just use as an example, my first account, then it will highlight it in the same way that it is highlighted over here. Okay, so when we look at our row with headings, we see that this has a red star next to it, right? And everything with a red star is mandatory. And then obviously the items that have optional in the brackets are optional. Now, the row with our headings in has been automatically identified. And if it happens that, hey, the row is incorrectly identified, or isn't identified, then you can click on the magnifying glass, right? And then you can select the entire row that contains your headings in it and press OK. Now, if you don't have headings, so if your headings are blank, right, so you don't actually have headings, you can then just click on blank headings, and that will take care of that for you. Okay, now let's look at the next step, which is first account. And this is the only instance where we need to select a specific instance of the account numbers or account codes. Okay, so in this case, we want to then go ahead, click on our magnifying glass, and then we want to select the very first account ID. So we see that right here, it's my first account ID. I click on OK, and as I mentioned, when I click on the account ID, it highlights it in the same color as we have there. Okay, now my account description is optional, so I can leave that out. But if you do accidentally go into it, you do have the option to cancel it, and what happens is it will tell you that it's not applicable. Okay, so let's move into the next option, which is the dates. And so when I click on date, what happens is I need to select the date, and like I mentioned, you can select any date that you have here. So for now, I'm just going to select this date right here, click on OK, and we see that it's highlighted my date in the date color as expected. Now, if your dates are formatted in text, it will give you a pop-up to tell you that, hey, these dates are formatted in text and can't be recognized yet. So you need to just tell it what the format of your dates are. So this drop down will then be enabled, and then you can click on it. But right now it's disabled because mine are actual dates. Okay, now let's move into our debits and credits on this side. So let's start off with my debit. Now when I click on that, we see I now need to go and select my debit value. And what we notice is that I don't actually have columns for debits and credits split. I only have an amount column, which means that you can then select both the debit and the credit in the same column. Okay, and you just need to select an instance of both of them. So in this case, here is a debit because it's positive, right? So I'll go ahead and click OK there, and then I need to select the credit. Again, I can select any value, doesn't need to be a specific one, and there is my credit, and then I can click on OK. Then I've got the option for opening balances, and this again is we just need to populate this in the same way. And how the opening balances on this GL seem to work, right, is that in the line where my account number is, that is going to show me my opening balance in the balance column over here. So I'm going to select this as my item for my debit. And one thing that you also can do here is you can select the exact same item for your credits as well, because that is where it would be. It would be here as a negative. So we can then go ahead and click OK. And with that, because we want to apply that trend analysis on our summary table, we're going to keep that ticked. And with that, everything is good for us to then go ahead and click on continue. And as we mentioned, this is then going to run through this GL similar to how it did with the other GL, and then perform the clean for us. Okay, so we just give it a few seconds, allow this to run, and then we'll have a cleaned GL. And there we go. So as we can see, original data untouched. Then we get the clean sheet, where we've actually got, it's named this account our account column, right? This column our account column, but we have a final account name over here. We've added the final period as well, and then we've got our final amount. So that then all pulls through into our pivot table in here, and when we scroll down, we'll see that everything has been dealt with as expected. Perfect. And that is how easy it is to run the GL keyword.